When she looks you in the eye and says, I don't know what I want, most men hear honesty. They hear vulnerability. They tell themselves she's just being careful or taking her time. But what that sentence really means in most cases is not confusion about life, it's uncertainty about you. Desire is not complicated. Attraction is not something a woman needs months or years to figure out. When a woman genuinely feels it, she moves toward it instinctively. She may move slowly, but she moves with clarity. The moment she verbalizes confusion, she's telling you that her feelings are not solid, not anchored, and not strong enough to commit. Here's the dangerous part. When you stay after hearing that line, you usually shift into proving mode. You try to be more understanding, more patient, more impressive. You start giving more time, more effort, more emotional availability, hoping that one day she'll wake up and choose you. But attraction doesn't grow under pressure, and it definitely doesn't grow under negotiation. The more you try to convince her, the more you position yourself as someone she can keep around without fully choosing. You become safe, familiar, and useful, but not desired. A woman who doesn't know what she wants is perfectly comfortable letting you fill the gap while she figures it out. She enjoys the attention, the emotional support, the consistency, and the validation you provide. Yet, because she has already warned you that she's unsure, she carries no responsibility for how long the situation lasts or how deeply you invest. If it ends, she can always say, I told you from the beginning. That's not transparency. That's preemptive justification. Over time, this dynamic slowly erodes your self respect. You begin to tolerate behavior you normally wouldn't. Mixed signals become normal. Delayed replies, canceled plans, emotional distance. All of it gets excused because she's figuring things out. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave because now you're emotionally invested in an outcome that may never come. You're not in a relationship, but you're no longer free either. You're suspended in uncertainty. What many men don't realize is that clarity is a form of respect. A woman who respects you will be clear about her intentions, even if the answer isn't what you want to hear. She may say she's not interested, or she may say she wants to move forward slowly, but she won't keep you in limbo. Confusion benefits the person with more options, and if she's unsure about you, it usually means she believes she can do better, or she's waiting to see if something else comes along. This is why staying in this situation is so damaging. Every day you remain available while she's undecided, you teach her that your time and attention have no cost. You show her that she doesn't have to choose you to keep you. And once that pattern is established, it's almost impossible to reverse. Attraction thrives on decisiveness, not on waiting rooms. Walking away at this moment isn't cold or hurtless. It's grounded, it communicates something powerful without a single argument that you value yourself too much to be an option. And ironically, that's the only response that ever has a chance of shifting attraction. But whether it does or not is irrelevant. Your responsibility is not to wait for someone to decide your worth. If she doesn't know what she wants, you do, and that's enough to leave with dignity. When she repeatedly tells you you're overreacting, especially in moments where you're calmly expressing how something made you feel, that isn't maturity or logic, it's dismissal. At first, it sounds small. It sounds like she's just trying to keep things from becoming dramatic. But over time, that phrase does something dangerous. It teaches you that your emotions are inconvenient, exaggerated, or wrong. And the moment you start questioning your own feelings to keep the peace, the balance of the relationship begins to tilt. Healthy communication requires two people who are willing to listen, even when the topic is uncomfortable. Disagreement is normal, conflict is normal. What's not normal is shutting down your partner's emotional experience instead of engaging with it. When she labels your concerns as overreactions, she avoids accountability. She doesn't have to reflect, explain, or change. She just has to make you feel unreasonable for bringing it up. Over time, this creates a subtle form of emotional conditioning. You start choosing silence over honesty. You rehearse conversations in your head and decide they're not worth having. You tell yourself it's better to let things go than to be told once again that you're making a big deal out of nothing. This isn't strength, it's self erasure. You're shrinking yourself to fit into a relationship that only works when one person's emotions dominate the space. What makes this especially damaging is how invisible it can be from the outside. There are no raised voices, no obvious insults, just calm, dismissive phrases that sound reasonable on the surface. But inside, your confidence is slowly being dismantled. You begin to wonder if you're too sensitive, too needy, too emotional, and the more you doubt yourself, the easier it becomes for her to control the emotional narrative of the relationship. In a healthy dynamic, your feelings don't have to be correct to be acknowledged, they simply have to be real. A partner who cares will try to understand why something affected you, even if they don't fully agree with it. They won't weaponize logic to invalidate emotion. They won't position themselves as the rational one while painting you as unstable or dramatic. That's not emotional intelligence, that's emotional superiority. The real danger here is long term exposure. When this pattern continues, you stop trusting your own emotional instincts. You second guess your boundaries. You tolerate behavior that crosses your values because you've been trained to believe that speaking up only creates problems. And once you lose that internal compass, leaving becomes harder because you're no longer sure if your reasons are valid enough. But here's the truth: if something consistently hurts you, it matters. If you feel unheard, it matters. A relationship where only one person's feelings are taken seriously is not a partnership, it's a hierarchy. And the longer you stay in it, the more of yourself you give up trying to keep things calm. The moment you realize that your emotions are being dismissed instead of respected is the moment you need to step back and reassess, because love never requires you to silence yourself to survive. When she says, I'm not ready for a relationship, but still wants to talk every day, still expects your time, still leans on you emotionally, and still reacts when you pull away, you're not dealing with honesty, you're dealing with contradiction. Readiness isn't proven by words, it's proven by behavior. And when her actions look like a relationship, but her commitment doesn't, that gap is where men get stuck for months or even years. This statement often comes dressed as vulnerability. She may say she's been hurt before, that she needs time, that she doesn't want to rush things, and on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But the problem isn't moving slowly. The problem is wanting all the emotional benefits of a relationship without any of the responsibility or exclusivity. She wants consistency from you while keeping her own options open. In this dynamic, you become emotionally invested while having no real position. You're expected to be available, supportive, and understanding, yet you have no right to ask for clarity or security. The moment you bring up where things are going, you're reminded that she already told you she wasn't ready. That line becomes a shield she can hide behind whenever accountability is required. What makes this situation especially dangerous is how easy it is to justify staying. You tell yourself that patience will pay off, that once you feel safe enough, she'll commit. But attraction doesn't grow from indefinite waiting. If anything, it weakens. The longer you accept less than what you want, the more you train her to see you as someone who will stay regardless of uncertainty. Desire doesn't thrive in imbalance, it thrives in mutual choice. There's also an unspoken power shift happening here. She gets emotional security without emotional risk. You get emotional risk without emotional security. That imbalance slowly eats away at your self respect. You begin to feel anxious when she pulls back, relieved when she leans in, and confused about where you stand, and confusion is exhausting. It keeps your nervous system on edge and your focus locked on someone who hasn't chosen you. A woman who truly wants to be with you may move cautiously, but she will move forward. She won't keep you in a gray area indefinitely. She'll make her intentions clearer over time, not more ambiguous. When someone is emotionally invested, they don't fear clarity, they create it. Ambiguity is only comfortable for the person who benefits from it. Staying in this situation sends a quiet message that you're willing to accept half connection in exchange for hope. But hope is not a strategy and it's not a foundation for a relationship. You deserve reciprocity, not potential. You deserve someone who chooses you openly, not someone who keeps you close while saying they're not ready. Walking away here isn't about punishing her or forcing commitment. It's about honoring your own emotional boundaries. The moment you stop providing relationship level energy without relationship level commitment is the moment you reclaim your power. And whether she steps up or fades away, you win either way. If she isn't ready for a relationship, believe her and be ready to leave. When she constantly brings up her ex, whether it's to criticize him, praise him, or casually reference shared memories, it's not just conversation, it's a signal. At first, you might tell yourself she's just being open, coach, or that she's processing her past. But when an ex becomes a recurring topic, it means that relationship is still occupying emotional space. And as long as that space is filled, there's less room for you. What many men miss is that emotional attachment doesn't always look like longing. Sometimes it looks like resentment, frustration, or unresolved anger. But strong emotions of any kind indicate that the chapter isn't closed. If she brings him up during arguments, compares your behavior to his, or uses him as a reference point for how things should be, you're not being seen as your own person. You're being measured against someone who's still living rent free in her mind. This creates a silent competition you never agreed to enter. You're trying to build something new while she's still emotionally anchored to the past. And the problem with competing against a memory is that memories are selective. They forget the bad days and romanticize the good ones. You're dealing with real life expectations, real flaws, real moments, while the X exists as a distorted highlight reel. Over time, this dynamic chips away at your sense of security. You start wondering if you're just a rebound, a distraction, or an emotional replacement. You may notice that she becomes distant after certain conversations or overly emotional around certain dates, songs, or situations. And instead of addressing it directly, she deflects, claiming it means nothing. But if it truly meant nothing, it wouldn't keep resurfacing. There's also a deeper issue beneath all of this. Unresolved attachment often leads to emotional unavailability. A person who hasn't let go of their past cannot fully commit to their present. They may enjoy your company, your attention, and your effort, but they struggle to invest deeply because part of them is still tied elsewhere. This leaves you doing most of the emotional work while wondering why something feels incomplete. Healthy relationships require emotional presence. That means showing up without ghosts from the past influencing every interaction. Everyone has history, coach, but not everyone drags it into their future. A woman who is ready for something real doesn't need to constantly reference her ex to make sense of her current relationship. She focuses on what's in front of her, not what's behind her. Staying in this situation often leads men to overcompensate. You try to be better than the ex, more understanding, more patient, more impressive. But that effort rarely creates attraction, it creates pressure. And the more you try to outperform a memory coach, the further you drift from being authentic. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. If she's still talking about her ex, she's still emotionally connected. And if she's emotionally connected to someone else, she cannot fully choose you. No amount of effort on your part can change that. You don't need to compete with the past. You need to walk away from anyone who hasn't left it. When she hurts you, crosses a boundary, or repeats a behavior that clearly affects you, and then shuts the conversation down with, "This is just how I am," what she's really saying is that your pain is less important than her comfort. At first, this phrase can sound like honesty or self awareness. It can even come across as confidence. But in reality, it's a refusal to take responsibility, and over time, it becomes one of the most damaging dynamics in a relationship. Every healthy relationship requires adjustment. Two people with different backgrounds, habits, and emotional patterns will naturally clash at times. Growth happens when both sides are willing to reflect and adapt. "This is just how I am" does the opposite. It freezes the relationship in place. It tells you that the behavior you're struggling with is permanent, non negotiable, and something you're expected to accept without question. What makes it especially harmful is how it shifts the burden onto you. Once she labels her behavior as part of her identity, any discomfort you feel becomes your problem. If you bring it up again, you're seen as demanding or controlling. If you don't, you silently absorb the damage. Either way, nothing changes on her side. Accountability disappears and empathy slowly fades with it. Over time, you start negotiating against yourself. You lower your standards, rationalize the behavior, and convince yourself that love means acceptance at all costs. But acceptance without boundaries isn't love, it's self betrayal. You're not asking her to change who she is as a person, you're asking her to acknowledge how her actions affect you. A partner who cares doesn't need to be perfect, but they need to be willing to try. This phrase also blocks emotional intimacy. Real closeness comes from vulnerability and mutual effort. When someone refuses to examine their behavior, they're choosing emotional distance over connection. You may feel like you're talking to a wall. No matter how calmly or clearly you express yourself, the outcome is the same. That repetition creates hopelessness, and hopelessness is what quietly drains relationships of their energy. Another danger is the normalization of hurt. When a harmful behavior is repeatedly justified instead of addressed, it becomes the baseline. You stop expecting better. You stop speaking up, and eventually, you stop recognizing how much of yourself you've given up just to keep things stable. That's not compromise, that's erosion. And a healthy, dynamic self awareness leads to growth, not excuses. Someone can say, "I struggle with this," while still being open to change. They can acknowledge patterns without using them as shields. "This is just how I am" closes the door to that possibility. It tells you that what you see now is what you'll get long term. Believing someone when they show you their unwillingness to grow is not pessimism, it's clarity. You can't build a future with someone who refuses to evolve in the present. And staying in that situation doesn't make you loyal, it makes you stuck. If she uses her personality as a reason to keep hurting you, take it as the truth and walk away while you still recognize yourself. When she says, "If you love me, you would," the sentence doesn't end with love, it ends with pressure. At first, it may sound like an emotional appeal, a request for reassurance or effort, but over time you begin to notice a pattern. Love becomes conditional. Affection becomes a bargaining chip, and your feelings are no longer enough on their own unless they're proven through compliance. This phrase works because it attacks something deeply personal, your desire to be seen as caring and committed. Instead of asking directly for what she wants, she frames it as a test of your love. Disagreeing no longer means having a different boundary, it means failing her emotionally. And once love is tied to obedience, the relationship quietly shifts from partnership to control. The most dangerous part is how subtle this manipulation can be. There may be no yelling, no threats, just disappointment, guilt, or withdrawal of affection when you don't give in. You start doing things not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what it will mean if you don't. Over time, your choices stop being free, they become fear driven. In a healthy relationship, love is expressed through mutual respect, not ultimatums. A partner can say, "This matters to me," without questioning your feelings or loyalty. They don't equate love with sacrifice at the cost of your boundaries. When someone truly loves you, they don't need to pressure you into proving it. They feel it through consistency and care. As this pattern continues, you may notice your boundaries slowly disappearing. You say yes when you mean no. You apologize for things that don't require apologies. You suppress your discomfort because resisting feels selfish or unloving. And the more you give in, the more the demands escalate. Once guilt works, it gets used again. This dynamic also distorts your understanding of love. You begin to associate love with anxiety, with walking on eggshells, with constantly measuring your actions to avoid conflict. But love is not supposed to feel like a performance. It's not something you earn through sacrifice alone. Real connection allows room for individuality, disagreement, and choice. There's also an imbalance of power here. One person becomes the judge of whether the other's love is sufficient. That authority is unhealthy and unsustainable. Over time, resentment builds even if you don't express it right away, and resentment quietly poisons even the strongest attraction. The truth is, someone who needs to control you to feel secure is not ready for a healthy relationship. Emotional security doesn't come from manipulation, it comes from trust, and trust can't exist where guilt is used as leverage. Recognizing this phrase for what it is doesn't make you cold or unloving, it makes you aware. Love should never require you to abandon yourself to prove it. If love is used as a weapon, it's no longer love, and that's your sign to leave.